Stay in the back, my wife hissed. Don't embarrass me. 30 seconds later, the woman who'd been looking for me since we lost touch walked straight past Diane to where I stood behind a marble column. Patricia Moreland didn't shake my hand. She took it. Her fingers were warm, steady. She looked at my wrist, at the pale scar that ran like a question mark from a job gone wrong back in 2003. Her eyes filled. The room kept humming, jazz playing, glasses clicking. But for a second, it all went quiet. "I've been looking for you," she whispered. "Somebody dropped a glass. I didn't have to turn to know who. That was the moment, the crack in the floor. Everything before that, every small humiliation, every swallowed word came rushing back. And everything after would change my life. My name is Russell Hayes. I'm 58 years old, and I'd been standing in the back for longer than I cared to admit. The gala was Diane's night. She'd said it at least 3 times on the drive from Rockford, smoothing her dress, checking her lipstick in the mirror like we were headed to a photo shoot instead of a fundraiser. The new regional director was in town. Donors would be watching. Optics mattered. "Just stand back," she told me as we pulled into the valet line. "Let me handle introductions." I nodded. I always did. But this night was different. 2 weeks earlier, I'd stood at Terry Gallagher's funeral. Terry was 64, union steward for 30 years, my mentor since I was a green apprentice. Heart attack took him while he was watching TV. His wife found him in his recliner, remote still in his hand. At the funeral, I watched Louise cry over the pension paperwork. Something about beneficiary forms that didn't match what Terry thought he'd signed. The union was helping her sort it out, but it stuck with me. Made me think about my own papers. When I got home that night, I went looking for our retirement binder. The blue one we'd kept in the desk drawer for years. It was gone. "Where's the retirement stuff?" I asked Diane. She barely looked up from her laptop. "Everything's paperless now, Russell." "Cleaner." I let it go, but it sat in my gut like bad coffee. The ballroom smelled like money. Polish and perfume and something floral piped through the vents. A trio played soft jazz near the windows. River lights flickered through the glass like they were part of the decor. Diane glided ahead of me, heels clicking, shoulders back. She looked right at home. I did not. The tux was rented. The collar itched. My hands were rough, calloused from 32 years of pulling wire and tightening lugs. She noticed them in the restroom hallway, grabbed my wrist like she was checking a watch. "God, Russell," she said, lowering her voice. "They look rough." "They're hands," I said. She pulled a small tube from her purse. "Here, just cover the worst of it." I stared at the beige smear on my palm. The calluses. The scar from when a live wire bit me because a breaker was mislabeled, and the homeowner swore everything was off. "These are from work," I said. "And this is from success," she said, nodding toward the ballroom. "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I washed the stuff off in the sink, watched it swirl away like it didn't matter, like I didn't. Back in the ballroom, Diane placed me behind her shoulder, half a step back, close enough to fetch a drink, far enough to be unseen. She laughed at jokes she'd heard before, talked about leadership and culture like they were personal inventions. People nodded, glasses clinked, names floated by that I didn't recognize. Then the music dipped, heads turned, phones disappeared. Patricia Moreland moved through the crowd like she owned it. Mid-50s, simple black dress, hair pulled back, no flashy jewelry. She shook hands as she walked, but her eyes were scanning, looking. Diane straightened, lifted her glass, stepped forward with a smile I knew well. Patricia didn't see her. She walked past the smile, past the toast, straight to me. I felt it before I saw it, like a change in air pressure. Her gaze locked onto mine and held. She closed the distance in 3 quiet steps and reached out, palms open. When she touched my hand, she paused. Her thumb brushed the scar. "Russell Hayes," she said softly, "from the 85 League." Behind her the room reacted, a sharp intake of breath, the thin chime of crystal on stone. Diane's glass shattered near my feet. I looked at Patricia and tried to speak, but my throat closed up. All I could manage was, "I think you've got the wrong guy." She shook her head just once. "No, I don't." Diane pushed forward, color draining from her face. "Patricia, Ms. Moreland, this is my husband. He's a union electrician." "From Rockford," Patricia said softly, without looking away from me. "I remember the game against Central, bottom of the 7th. 2 outs." Diane froze. I felt small and tall at the same time, seen in a way I hadn't been in years, in decades. Patricia squeezed my hands. "Once more. We'll talk. Soon." Then she was gone, absorbed by the crowd like she'd never stopped. Diane stared at me like I'd set the building on fire. "What was that?" "I don't know," I said. But something had shifted. I could feel it in my chest, like a door that had been closed for years had cracked open. I didn't sleep that night. Diane lay beside me, stiff as a board, her back turned. The hotel room was quiet except for traffic along Wacker Drive and the occasional siren. I kept replaying Patricia's face. How her eyes had gone straight to my hands. How sure she'd sounded. By morning, Diane was already dressed. She stood at the window with her phone pressed to her ear, whispering sharp sentences. When she noticed me watching, she turned her back. On the drive home, she didn't bring it up. Neither did I. The silence sat between us like a third passenger. It broke 2 days later. I was at the kitchen table with coffee and the local paper when my phone buzzed. Unknown number, Chicago area code. "Russell Hayes?" a woman asked. "Yes, this is Patricia Moreland. We met at a diner just off Alpine Road, the kind with vinyl booths and a bell on the door. Patricia was already there, sitting with her back to the window, hands folded around a chipped mug. No entourage, no assistant, just her. "You still drink it black," she said as I slid into the booth. "Never stopped." She smiled, just the smallest curve of her mouth. And for a second, I saw her younger, in her hair, laughing in the bleachers with a cardboard tray of nachos balanced on her knees. "You remember," I said. "I remember everything. That's the problem." She told me she'd been back in town once, years ago. Drove past the old field on Boyland. The chain-link fence was rusted. The outfield grass was patchy. But she could still see me at the plate in '85. The crack of the bat. The way the whole place stood up at once. I told her why I left baseball. About my father's funeral, about the bills, about the job. At the plant that turned into an apprenticeship. Then a union card. "I wrote you," she said quietly. "After I moved, I called. I even asked around. I never got anything." She nodded like she'd expected that answer. "I know. We talked for an hour. About Rockford changing. About work. About time." She didn't touch me. Didn't flirt. Just listened. When we stood to leave, she slid a card across the table. "If you ever need help understanding paperwork," she said, "call this number. It's not about money. It's about clarity." That night, Diane noticed the card. "Who's Patricia Moreland?" "Too casual? Someone from my past." She smiled without warmth. Funny how the past shows up right when the future's on the line. I didn't respond. I went to bed thinking about letters that never arrived. And then I thought about my retirement account. Because for the first time, I realized I couldn't remember the last statement I'd seen. The next morning, I stopped by the credit union on my lunch break. The woman at the counter knew me. We'd gone to the same high school, though she was a year behind. She typed for a minute, frowned, looked up. "Your mailing address was changed," she said. "When?" "About 6 months ago." "To where?" She hesitated. "A P.O. box in town." My stomach dropped. "Who authorized that?" She glanced at the screen. "Your wife? Power of attorney?" I stared at her. "I never signed a power of attorney. It's on file, Russell." I drove back to the shop with my hands shaking on the wheel. That evening, I came home to find Diane on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, tense. "I know it's expensive," she said quietly, "but I can't move her. Not yet." When she noticed me in the doorway, she straightened. "I'll call you back." "Who was that?" I asked. "Work stuff," she said, already moving past me. But something in her voice, something desperate. Later, I asked her to sit down. "I went to the credit union," I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Why would you do that?" "They said you changed the mailing address, that you have power of attorney." She sighed like I was a child who'd interrupted her work. "It was just easier that way. You forget things. I don't forget my own name." "Don't be dramatic." I asked to see the paperwork. She brought a folder from the kitchen drawer and slid it across the table. Thick. Tabs, signatures, dates. My name was on it. "See?" she said gently. "You signed." I looked at the signature. It was mine. Or close enough. I remembered the day she'd handed me a stack of forms after dinner, said they were updates for insurance and benefits. I'd signed where she pointed. "You said this was routine." "It was," she said. "You're reading too much into it." I flipped pages. Beneficiary changes, digital delivery, a spousal consent form I didn't remember discussing. My glucose monitor beeped from my pocket. The one I'd been wearing since my doctor warned me about pre-diabetes 3 months ago. Stress was spiking my blood sugar. "Tom," Diane said, and I heard something in her voice. Not concern, calculation. "You're getting worked up. That's not good for your health." "I need time," I said. She nodded, already standing. "Of course, just trust me." That night, I called the number on Patricia's card. The forensic accountant she'd recommended met me at a diner near the old mall. Stanley Rothman, mid-50s, legal pad between us, pot of burnt coffee on the table. He spoke plain, explained how accounts could be redirected, how paperless delivery worked, how easy it was to move things without raising alarms if one spouse controlled the flow. "You're not crazy," he said, "and you're not alone." On the drive home, I pulled into a grocery store lot and just sat there, hands on the wheel. I thought about the way Diane had laughed on the phone, about how she'd made me feel small for years, about that phone call. I can't move her. Move who? The next day at work, I was running conduit in a new warehouse when Jerome Foster came up. Jerome was 42, been working under me for 5 years, good kid, fast learner. "Hey, Russ," he said. "You okay? You've been quiet." I looked at him, thought about Terry, about how the union took care of its own. "Jerome," I said, "you know Terry Gallagher's wife? The pension thing?" He nodded. "Union's helping her." "Why?" "I think I need to talk to someone." He pulled out his phone. "My uncle's a union lawyer. Dennis O'Sullivan. Want me to call him?" That's how it started. Not with a dramatic confrontation, with a younger guy who respected me enough to help. Dennis met me at a bar off East State Street. He was 61, plain suit, talked like a guy who'd spent decades watching people lie. "You don't need to be loud," he told me, tapping the papers Stanley had helped me print. "You just need to be precise." "I'm not trying to ruin her," I said. He looked up. "Then you're already ahead of her." Over the next week, Patricia checked in every few days, not offering money, just asking if I was okay. It helped more than she knew. I kept working, kept coming home, kept acting normal. But I was documenting everything. Dates, words, changes. Terry Gallagher had taught me something back when I was an apprentice. Brothers don't gossip. Brothers investigate. I found more. A second mortgage on our house. $45,000 taken out 8 months ago. I never signed it, or I thought I didn't. But there was my signature again. Close enough. The paperwork was in a locked filing cabinet. I'd watched Diane open it once, memorized the combination. She wasn't as careful as she thought. Inside, I found invoices, memory care facility, Shady Oaks Senior Living, $8,200 per month. Patient name, Gloria Brennan, Diane's mother. I sat on the garage floor with those papers spread around me. Everything clicked into place. The phone calls, the stress, the desperate need for control. When I confronted Diane about it, she finally broke. We were in the kitchen, dinner untouched on the table. I found the invoices, I said. Your mother, the care home. Her face went white, then red. Then she just crumpled into the chair. Gloria has Alzheimer's, she said, voice shaking. Advanced. She doesn't remember me half the time. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have said we couldn't afford it. You would have said put her in Medicaid. And I couldn't. I couldn't watch her in some state facility with 30 other people and 1 nurse on duty. So you stole from me? I was protecting us. Protecting her. The tears were real now. Not manipulation. Just desperation. The second mortgage was supposed to buy me time to figure things out. The power of attorney was just to make things easier. Easier for who? For both of us. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Work is cutting positions. If I lose my job, we lose everything. The house, your insurance, everything. My glucose monitor beeped, loud in the quiet kitchen, stress spiking my blood sugar again. Diane saw it, saw the device on my arm. For a second, I saw real fear in her eyes. Russell, your health. My health is fine. My dignity isn't. She reached for my hand. I pulled back. I made mistakes, she said. But I was trying to hold everything together. Can't you see that? I could. That was the problem. I could see a woman drowning, grabbing at anything to stay afloat. Even me. But understanding didn't mean accepting. You should have told me, I said. We could have figured it out together. Could we? Really? When was the last time you looked at our finances? When was the last time you asked about anything beyond your next paycheck? That stung, because it was partly true. I'd let her handle things, trusted her, and she'd used that trust against me. I'm calling a lawyer, I said. Her face hardened. If you do that, I'll fight, and I'll win. You think anyone's going to believe you over me? The union electrician who can barely use email versus the HR director with 20 years of corporate experience? They'll believe the documents. What documents? The ones you stole from my locked cabinet? She had me there. Sort of. This doesn't have to get ugly, Russell. We can work this out, for both our sakes. But I was already walking away. That weekend, Diane hosted a small dinner at our house. HR donors, leadership types. She didn't ask me. She informed me. Just stay upstairs, she said, arranging flowers. We're discussing initiatives. I almost listened. Almost. But then I heard one of the donor wives in the entryway say, Diane, your house is so curated. Curated. Like a museum. Like I was a dusty exhibit in the back room. I came down the stairs. Not in a tux. In my work boots, worn jeans, plain button-down I'd ironed myself. Diane's eyes went wide. Russell, she hissed. What are you doing? Living here, I said. One of the donors, a gray-haired man in a blazer, looked at my boots and smiled. Those Red Wings? He asked. Yeah. He nodded. Good boots. My dad wore those his whole life. Diane's smile froze. For a second, I wasn't invisible. And I realized something. She needed me invisible, needed me in the back. Because if I stood in the light, people might start asking questions. The Ethics and Leadership Awards dinner was 3 weeks away. I had work to do. The Ethics and Leadership Awards dinner came 3 weeks later. Diane's name was printed on banners beside words like integrity, transparency, corporate values. I came in 10 minutes late. Not because I was nervous, because timing matters. I wore a dark jacket and clean boots, not flashy, not defiant, just me. From the stage, Diane looked radiant, confident, untouchable. When she started her speech, the room quieted. At a time when trust in institutions is fragile, she said into the microphone, it's our responsibility as leaders to uphold ethical standards, even when it's uncomfortable. I felt a strange calm wash over me, because I knew what was already moving. 3 days earlier, packets had gone out, through proper channels, timestamps, receipts, the audit, committee, outside counsel, the board liaison Patricia had quietly introduced me to. Nothing leaked, nothing sensational, just facts, expense reimbursements that didn't align, conflict of interest disclosures that were incomplete, HR emails documenting pressure on spouses to sign routine documents, beneficiary changes made without informed consent, paper cuts, but enough of them to bleed. From the corner of my eye, I saw a man in a gray suit whisper to a woman at the head table. Another phone came out, then another. Diane kept talking. Her voice wavered just a touch. Because dignity in the workplace isn't just a slogan, a hand went up near the front. A board member stood. Diane, he said carefully, may we pause? The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone cleared their throat. Diane smiled. Tight. Of course, there are some questions that need to be addressed before we continue. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for help, for control. They found me instead. I stood up. The sound traveled. Fabric against chair, the scrape of boots on carpet, heads turned. Who is that? Someone whispered. Diane's face went pale. This is highly inappropriate. This is my husband. He's confused. There it was. That word again. I walked forward slowly, stopping a few feet from the stage. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. But my hands were steady. Steadier than they'd been in years. I'm not confused, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I'm informed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The board member nodded once. Mr. Hayes has provided documentation, substantial documentation. Diane laughed, a brittle sound. This is a personal matter, a marital dispute. No, the board member said. It's a compliance issue. The projector behind her flickered to life. Email headers, dates, policy excerpts. Diane turned, eyes darting, lips parting without sound. You don't understand, she said, voice cracking. This is being taken out of context. My mother is sick. I was trying to... I've been in the back long enough to see everything, Diane, I said quietly. Silence fell hard. My glucose monitor beeped, loud in the quiet room. A reminder of what stress had been doing to my body, of what standing in the back had cost me. She looked at me then. Not with anger. Not even with fear. But with something close to disbelief. Like she'd built her whole world on the assumption that I'd never stand up. Her hand shook. The glass of water on the lectern tipped, rolled, shattered on the stage. Nobody moved to help. The board member thanked the attendees for their patience, announced a temporary suspension pending review. Donors began filing out. Some avoided eye contact. A few looked at me with something like respect. Diane was escorted off the stage, her heels clicking out of rhythm for the first time I'd ever heard. I didn't follow. I stayed where I was until the room began to empty. When I finally stepped outside, The night air felt cool and clean. I stood by the river and breathed. Patricia joined me a moment later. She didn't touch me. "You did it," she said. "We did it right," I replied. She smiled. "That's the hard way. It's the only way that lasts. Inside, the dominoes were still falling. But out there, under the city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt since that summer in '85. Solid. I moved out the following week, not in a rush, not in the middle of the night. I packed what was mine. Tools, clothes, a box of old photos, left the rest exactly where it was. Let the house look curated without me. The lawyer handled everything. Because of the paper trail, because everything had been done quietly and correctly, the divorce didn't turn into a circus. The beneficiary changes were reversed. The retirement accounts were corrected. The power of attorney was voided. It wasn't a jackpot. It was fairness. And after years of being told I didn't understand numbers, fairness felt like winning. Diane lost her job before the investigation even finished. HR directors don't survive ethics violations, especially public ones. I heard through town, because in Rockford you always hear, that she was exploring new opportunities. That was the phrase she liked to use on other people. I didn't gloat. I didn't call. I didn't go looking. Revenge, I learned, isn't loud when it's done right. It's final. The quiet days were harder than I expected. There were mornings I woke up alone in a small apartment off Charles Street and felt the weight of everything settle in my chest. 32 years is a long time to realize you've been shrinking yourself. Some nights I lay awake staring at a ceiling that wasn't mine, wondering how I'd missed it, how I'd let someone make me feel small in my own life. But then there were other moments, like the first time I checked my accounts on my own and understood every line. Or the afternoon I stopped by the old field on Boyland and watched a high school game from the bleachers. The crack of the bat still sounded the same. Or the day I met Patricia for coffee again. No gala, no speeches, just a quiet place near downtown with chipped mugs and bad pastries. We talked slowly, carefully, about where we were now, not where we'd been. We didn't pretend we were 25 again. We didn't rush anything. At our age, you don't chase fireworks. You look for steady light. Sometimes we drove with the radio on low. Classic rock slipping through the speakers of her old SUV. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. That was enough. Jerome stopped by my apartment one Saturday, helped me move furniture, brought beer. We didn't talk about Diane. We talked about work, about a tricky three-way switch he couldn't figure out. I walked him through it. "You taught me everything, Russ," he said as he left. That meant more than any verdict. Dennis O'Sullivan called to check in every couple weeks, not about legal stuff, just to see how I was doing. That's what union brothers do. Patricia sent texts between our coffee meetups. Nothing heavy. Just, "How's your day?" Or "Saw this and thought of you with a picture of the old baseball field." Small things. But they added up. I thought a lot about dignity in those weeks, about how easy it is to give it away, one small compromise at a time, about how standing in the back becomes a habit if you're not careful. At 58, I wasn't starting over. I was taking myself back. My glucose levels stabilized once the stress lifted. Turns out your body knows when you're living wrong. I'm still working, still pulling wire, still teaching younger guys like Jerome the difference between a hot and a neutral, still wearing my Red Wings. The apartment is small, the budget is careful. There's no fairy tale ending with a billionaire sweeping me away. But I wake up every morning and know exactly where my money is. I know exactly who I am, and I know that nobody gets to make me invisible anymore. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever felt invisible, underestimated, or quietly pushed aside, take a moment to sit with that feeling. Some people spend their whole lives trying to impress a room. Others finally remember who they are and step forward. because here's what I learned. You can't undo 30 years of standing in the back. But you can decide, right now, to walk forward. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply refuse to be small anymore. The real victory isn't in the dramatic moment on stage. It's in the quiet morning after, when you check your own accounts and understand every number. When you help a younger guy with a wiring problem and realize your knowledge still matters. When you meet someone for coffee not because you need saving, but because you're finally ready to be seen. At 58, I finally understood. Dignity isn't something someone gives you. It's something you stop letting them take away.